from small hands permitting the task.
Hi there. In this video, I'll discuss how we can go about this whole revolution thing, mostly as a primer to new leftists, but it also might be useful for those that have been around for a while as well. This will be timestamped, so feel free to jump around if you'd like. Let's get started. 1. Why do we want revolution? This is a relatively simple question that can be answered with many volumes, but I'll keep it simple. Capitalism is an untenable and unstable system built on the inherent injustice of market allocation, as well as the destruction of the environment and commodification of everything around us. It hurts us, the planet, and pretty much just about anything else. A deeper introductory analysis of capitalism and its faults can be found in an earlier video I made here. Only through revolution, the overthrow of one class, the ruling class, by another class, the working class, can we finally escape the endless boom and bust cycles, the crises of overproduction, and the ruin of our common earth. The system that will overtake and supersede capitalism is socialism, in which the market is done away with, the means of production are democratically managed, and the state machinery, in the hands of the working class, is made to work for the working class and society as a whole. For a deeper introductory dive into socialism and its inherent superiority over capitalism, take a look at this video I made here. Now that's all well and good, but how do we go about this whole revolution thing, exactly? 2. The approach to revolution. As much as you and I would love to just flip a switch to achieve our goals, sadly the real world is different. Only tireless work towards revolution, and the appropriate material conditions can result in a situation that could possibly lead to the overthrow of capitalism. What exactly does this tireless work look like, though? Simple. The building of organizations, education, direct action, mutual aid, applying the mass line, and ceaseless agitation, amongst other things. All of this will be touched on soon. Let's take this one by one. What's this about building organizations? 3. Building organizations and their importance. Human beings are a cooperative species. We rarely work alone, and anything worth doing requires collective efforts of the masses of people from their various walks of life. It goes without saying that anything you can do on your own can be done more quickly, efficiently, and cleanly by a dedicated organization, and politics is no different. Now, what forms of organizations are we talking about, exactly? Well, that's up to the material conditions of your region and the requirements of your community. Having an appropriate materialist analysis is of prime importance. These organizations can be political parties, or women's groups, or student unions, or even standard workers' unions, amongst many other things. The point being, though, is that nothing can be accomplished without the proper organizations being in place. History has proven that organic mobilization, where people spontaneously mobilize, is at best easily fragmented and crushed, or at worst non-existent. Organizations exist to lay the groundwork for that crucial moment, or at least to nudge it along. Once it comes around, though, there is some ready-made infrastructure with an appropriate analysis, the people's trust, and a detailed plan of action at hand. Now, the boring organizational aspects of these groups, too, depend on the material conditions. At times, a highly centralized leadership is necessary. At others, a decentralized umbrella organization with numerous streams of leadership, but nonetheless a single goal. Leadership is fluid, sometimes centralized, sometimes running through multiple streams, depending on the material conditions. There isn't just one answer at all times. Under capitalism, the issues people face, from exploitation to the unjust distribution of resources according to profit rather than need, is painted as moral failings of individuals, rather than systemic defects that need to be, and definitely can be, corrected. In an organization, those that take part, as well as those that directly benefit from the work these groups do, help people develop an appropriate and correct analysis of the situation, and the undeniable failings of the capitalist system. In essence, organizations are the key to, and school of, liberation. To summarize, the point of organizations and their purpose is twofold. Firstly, to directly aid our communities, and in doing so broadcast the failures of the capitalist system. And secondly, to build a preliminary form of dual power and equip the people with the necessary tools so that, in that crucial moment, we can properly take advantage and win our liberation. 4. Education and its importance. Now, what of education? This doesn't mean only reading theory, although that is of paramount importance too. It also means organic education through organizing, be it understandings of legal frameworks, public relations, basic medical knowledge, and computer know-how. The reason theory is important is because it is a guide to action. It is what allows us to properly understand the world around us and how to go about critiquing and, more importantly, changing it. If you're a new Marxist and want some advice on what you should be doing education-wise, take a look at this video here. If you'd like to get a basic reading list on socialism, take a look at this video here. The point of educating yourself in the theory is to be able to develop your criticisms of capitalism and to confidently and accurately share your understanding with your community and those around you. This, combined with direct action, is what builds class consciousness, the very first block towards abolishing capitalism. With that said, what about the other sort of education? Theory can be done on your own, or in groups, which is highly recommended, but interpersonal communication skills, how to handle conflict, basic cooperative and democratic participation, accurately finding a solution to a problem found through said cooperative effort, all this is something that can only really be done in groups. Finally, professional organizations tend to grow the, let's say, more boring but still very necessary stuff as well, from administrative skills and technical organization of transport groups, etc., to things like video editing and Photoshop skills or creative writing in the forms of pamphlets or seminars and more. 5. Mutual aid and basic organizing. With all the introductory stuff out of the way, let's get more concrete. Firstly, what is mutual aid? Mutual aid is collective coordination to meet each other's needs. We fundamentally understand that the systems we have in place are not going to meet those needs, and the aim of mutual aid projects is to develop this point. It's to set up alternative sources of that which your community is in need of, be it medical attention or housing or whatever else, accompanied by constant education, explaining why is it that their needs aren't being met in the first place. The best example that comes to mind, at least for the United States and other Western countries, is that of the Black Panthers. A dedicated Marxist group, they saw the direct injustices being dealt to their own African American communities, educated themselves with the relevant theory, and got to work developing a free children's breakfast program, community protection, free medical clinics and ambulance rides, aid to the elderly and infirm when they run errands, educational initiatives, and much more. Notice, they not only provided what their communities needed and weren't being provided in the first place, but also were delivering a clear and scathing criticism of the capitalist system and systemic racism in the US. To use an old Sufi adage, they not only fed the stomach, but the mind too. This process of educating those who benefited from the mutual aid projects of the Black Panthers instilled in those communities a drive for change, which is what made the Black Panthers so successful in the eyes of the working class, and so dangerous in the eyes of the ruling class. On a side note, the police, being the radiantly positive organization that it is, broke into the church storing the food for the Black Panther free breakfast program and destroyed it, mostly by urinating and stepping on it, just in case you ever doubted whose side they're on. We need to make something abundantly clear. Mutual aid is not charity. In times of crisis, the ruling class pushes very safe, sanitized, and fairly ineffective organizations revolving around charity, in which the decisions on what is needed, how much, where, and to whom are completely disconnected from the people who are most affected by them. These institutions aren't intended to get at the root cause of whatever the issue is, be it poverty or homelessness or drug abuse or whatever else. Instead, it's designed as a pretty PR game for the rich and influential to beautify themselves and their ever-so-generous philanthropy, without ever even attempting to correct the issue at hand. It's symptomatic treatment, not a cure, and it's intended to make humane a system that is inherently inhumane. Side note, the question of security is very important, but sadly can't be discussed at the present time. Some quick points are community defense, community patrolling, basic security knowledge, both armed and unarmed methods of self-defense, first aid, and legal knowledge. You should keep all this in mind, and the internet is your best friend. 6. The pitfalls of organizing. This topic deserves a video of its own, really, but there's no harm in briefly touching on it here. One of the main pitfalls is lifestyleism. Capitalism commodifies everything, and in today's world, even Being woke, a performative demonstration of how in tune you are with an understanding of systemic bias against race, or sex, or class, or gender, exists as something right next to your favorite type of music. The liberation of us, the vast majority of humanity, isn't something to add onto a Twitter bio and that's that. The necessary serious follow-up on those convictions is required, otherwise it's a stale and impotent opinion that dies as soon as it's invoked. Another common pitfall is one of a lack of focus, rigid unquestionable hierarchies, and secrecy within the organization. In some cases, the material conditions of the moment demand secrecy. Important addresses, or the starting point of some revolutionary action of some kind, are relevant examples. In direct community organizing in a non-revolutionary moment, though, is not only counterproductive, but also harmful. Decision-making should be inclusive, clear, sympathetic, and open to suggestion or influence from the relevant community you're working in. There shouldn't be any central group or clique that's undemocratically chosen, which decides how everything works and will be organized. Not only does this set this one group out for burnout, but also directly harms our aims by dividing the organization into an us and them, tiering the core and essentially factionalizing or otherwise dissolving the organization in the process. A related point is paternalism, elitism, overpromising, and under-delivering. These organizations are educational institutions for those activists that take part, and the people are the professors. You're not graciously descending from the heavens to help them. You're building a mutually beneficial and cooperative movement aimed at growing the impetus for the abolishment of capitalism. The overpromising and under-delivering part is self-explanatory, and why proper accounting with checks and balances being in place are of paramount importance. Transparency, with group finances, democratic participation, and how best these funds should be used, with clear communication along all lines, can prevent potentially disastrous outcomes. Equally, the opposite is also an issue. Being too tight-fisted with funds or resources and having a scarcity mindset, be it in money or time or labor or whatever else, can inhibit the positive influence of the organization, cultivating a cold and very pragmatic approach that distances us from the community that we're trying to reach in the first place. This is why I highlighted those more boring aspects earlier, such as legal knowledge and administrative practice. Many of these common issues can be corrected through solid accounting and transparency. This is only a small section, and there are many more we can talk about, but we can move on to the next point for now. 7. The co-option of progressive movements. The ruling class cares very little for the daily suffering of those underneath them, normally. I say normally because this balance is disrupted when a crisis occurs. Systems break down and are either out completely or in the process of being put back together. This exacerbates the daily inequalities and pulls the curtain back, so to speak. It is our job to expose these injustices and couple them with an appropriate analysis so that the temporary flare of people's anger and sense to contribute isn't lost after things calm down again. The ruling class hates crises not only because they expose setting inequalities, but also because they disrupt the status quo of surplus extraction and profit-making, causing them to push the capitalist state to smooth all of this out as soon as possible so that normal can return. Most of all, it shows that the things you want and fight for, things like public transport, or healthcare, rent freezes or reductions, freezes on loan payments, with student loans being the most famous example that comes to mind, and much more are definitely possible. Before the crisis, they tell you they're not. During the crisis, all of a sudden the government rolls out temporary forms of the very things they told you were impossible. The current pandemic is an excellent example of this, with eviction moratoriums, increased unemployment benefits and income support, free public transit, suspensions of student loan payments, and more. This is in no way all-encompassing or even adequate, but it shows that it is possible given the right sort of impulse. Mutual aid, direct organizing, and a proper political program can build that impulse. Keep in mind, though, successful growing movements face two responses from the powers that be. Either they are mercilessly harassed until they are crushed, like the Black Panthers were, or the government and corporations and the media catches on and tries to extend a friendly gesture, let's call it. They try to bring them into a sanitized fold, framing them as heroic volunteers helping impoverished communities, and slowly, bit by bit, making them part of the system, in tandem with charities and ineffective and defunded government programs and corporate initiatives. Eventually, these politicians and philanthropists begin associating and even attempting to direct such groups with results that you may expect. Remember, the reason these organizations exist is to show the failures of capitalism, to advocate for the abolishing of capitalism, and to build dual power in preparation of such an event. The aid that is extended in cooperation with various communities is to show that not only is a new world possible, but also why we want a new world, how we can achieve it, and how we can do it on our own terms as a class. We should never lose sight of our fundamental end goal, In times of crisis, we win concessions, but these are only as strong and lasting as the mobilizations that made them necessary. The only true change that can be maintained is by revolution. For a deeper dive into the pitfalls of solely reformism, check out this video I made here. 8. Concrete steps. What can we do immediately? This may sound a little silly, but talk. Talk to your family, your friends, your coworkers. Work within your community and bring together like-minded people. Join existing organizations if they're around, aid in currently existing mutual aid groups, and try to get involved in the organizing activity. Try to bring forth a simple to understand yet sharp criticism of capitalism. This is where the importance of educating yourself shines. You don't even need to mention socialism at first. It's enough to sow the seeds of doubt, and to subsequently follow up when your community or those around you are more ready. Always relate your criticism of capitalism to people's direct issues. Lack of employment and healthcare, infrastructure, or even very specific material issues people face. Always properly analyze them and turn them into a quick, concise, and appreciated bit of knowledge to share about the failings of the current government and the capitalist system. The most fundamental point is to always be kind, patient, sympathetic, and non-combative. It doesn't matter how good your arguments sound, or how much your organization has helped, if people feel you're arrogant, stubborn, inattentive, or just plain rude. A smile, a brisk, empathetic discussion, and an appreciation of others' perspectives, even if they're wrong, goes much farther than the debate bro facts and logic approach. Be kind, patient, and discuss with empathy. That's how we get people on our side. If you do your job right and convey the message appropriately, there's no way they'll reject you, as the things we want are directly in their and our interests. Now, suppose you have a bunch of people together. You're motivated, dedicated, educated, and ready to help. What's the next step? Your best bet is to start small. After your attempts at forming a basic political program, you'll need to find out what exactly is needed by your community. How exactly do you find this out, though? 9. Democratic centralism and the mass line. The correct questions need to be asked. How are correct ideas reached? How do we know we are actually meeting the needs of our communities? What steps should be taken to reach a correct analysis and a solid political program? All of these questions are answered by the Chinese revolutionary experience and their application of the mass line. What is the mass line, though? Let's quote Mao and see what he has to say.
All correct leadership is necessarily from the masses to the masses. This means take the ideas of the masses, scattered and unsystematic ideas, and concentrate them. Through study, turn them into concentrated and systematic ideas. Then go to the masses and propagate and explain these ideas until the masses embrace them as their own, hold fast to them, and translate them into action, and test the correctness of these ideas in such action. Then, once again, concentrate ideas from the masses, and once again go to the masses so that the ideas are persevered in and carried through. And so on, over and over again in an endless spiral, with the ideas becoming more correct, more vital, and richer each time. Such is the Marxist theory of knowledge.
This is the kernel of correct political approach. Discuss, identify the scattered and unclear grievances of the community you're attempting to reach, formulate and concentrate those ideas and bring them back to that community. Through a constant cycle of collaborative corrections and modifications, the correct conclusions and phases of action can be reached. Where does democratic centralism fall into all this? What is it, exactly? Well, it's the Leninist idea of diversity in discussion and unity in action. You can have a vibrant democratic atmosphere once proposals are being put forward and discussed, but once a democratic consensus is reached on a decision, everyone, including those that don't necessarily agree with said democratic consensus, should abide by and follow through with the decision of the majority. In this way, we can ensure that our efforts are targeted, full-bodied, and successful. Otherwise, we leave room for fragmentation, factionalism, and a castration of the main push of the organization. We need to ensure that the limited resources that we do have, be it labor or money or whatever else, aren't needlessly wasted because of weak and scattered pushes in all directions. Now, of course, this isn't the correct approach in absolutely 100% of cases, and I again refer you to a proper analysis of your material conditions. 10. The role of the individual. It's always good to remember that different people have different capacities. Some can be background figures, while others foreground. Some are comfortable and enjoy speaking publicly. Others like to be more reserved. Socialism is an inclusive movement, and not everyone needs to be in the thick of it, organizing strikes and battling it out with the repressive forces of the state or whatever. If you're the type that dislikes large gatherings or gets anxious with burdens of administration or logistical work, that's equally fine. Whatever you can contribute, be it writing or art or even simple packaging work, for example in grocery drives, is appreciated and directly contributes to the movement. With that said, I think everyone should try their hand in administrative work. It's a lot easier than it sounds, I promise you. One entry point that I think most could find easy to do, find personally fulfilling, and not too burdensome is gardening. In particular, community gardens for growing food. There are endless videos and books on the topic, and meeting at least part of your community's grocery needs for free is one of the quickest ways to winning their trust and getting them involved as well. This, combined with community volunteers and political education, is one of many seeds, pardon the pun, that can germinate into larger organizations. This just so happens to be a fairly tame and cheap introductory point, and that's intentional. With more volunteers, basic daycare facilities to working parents can be provided. Having the assistance of some nurses and doctors that are willing to donate their time, even basic forms of healthcare could be provided, too. With sufficient growth, you can even expand to developing collective housing units. I'm not saying luxury condos, but something small you can provide to the homeless in your area. I'm not sure about you, but where I'm from, concrete, beams, and piping material is very cheap. If that's not possible, then take a look at whatever cheap rundown or abandoned structure in your area you can get a hold of, refurbish it, and turn it into housing. Hold on, why the sudden jump to rudimentary housing, you ask? Well, the question of the lumpen proletariat cannot be ignored. In the US, the homeless are the largest subsection of America's lumpen proletariat. For example, unemployed and stripped of their humanity, under capitalism they're just cast aside to rot, essentially. In an equal and democratically arranged society, these people have so much to contribute and are willing to. Knowing this, they can be one of the greatest sources of revolutionary commitment when the time comes. These community gardens, basic housing blocks, organizational tasks, etc. are all avenues for reincorporating them into your community. Not only would working with them restore their dignity, but would also give a form of productive employment to people who are more than willing to contribute if given the chance. This isn't pity or self-serving charity. This is a recognition of our condition in theirs. All of this begins with a conversation and a few seeds in some pots. The only thing you need is action. 11. Tasks of the Western left. A lot of what I've said here has been of universal applicability, but here's one point I'd like to extend to the Western, and specifically American left. It should go without saying that the number one global threat to leftist movements worldwide is the American imperial machine. Be it through sanctions, diplomatic and material support of reactionary forces, or outright invasion, the US has killed more revolutionary movements in their cradle than any other country. This means that, as American, and other NATO ally nation leftists, a sacred duty falls on your shoulders. To put it concretely, resisting American imperialism internally by preventing the US government from exercising its imperial ambitions abroad, and directly supporting those movements abroad, will open up possibilities not before known to the American left. This is all well and good, but how do we do this? Simple. You form anti-war organizations, and you turn all existing mutual aid or other organizations into anti-war organizations as well. You can still do all your regular work, but you can associate and broaden your criticism by involving anti-imperialism as well. The vast majority of the American and other NATO ally nation working classes do not benefit from these wars. In fact, just the opposite. Resisting American oppression abroad is resisting American oppression within. When it comes to educating your fellow countrymen on this, you have to remember that many may have the perspective of liberals, a worldview that is thoroughly centered on the "a few bad apples" analysis. They seem to be unable of grasping that some institutions are simply made to perpetuate and reproduce what we want to morally condemn, be it police violence, or military atrocities, or economic practices under capitalism. Not because they're evil, but because it serves certain class interests and maintains the status quo, or raises profits. Moralism plays no part here. That doesn't mean appealing to the liberals' moral sense is useless, though. In my opinion, it's a great first step. Towards that point, I can recommend two works, Killing Hope by William Blum and The Triumph of Evil by Austin Murphy. Read these two works, discuss them with your communities, and share that knowledge. Work towards changing the perception of the US military and US foreign policy and US action worldwide. I get that must be very difficult in such a highly militarized country, but your work now, if successful, will save countless lives down the road. Related actions can be educating yourself and others on movements abroad, raising money and materiel for them, whatever they require or advertise through their above-ground organizations, like in, for example, the Philippines, protesting US actions against them, and even sabotage if the movement within your country is mature enough. The Black Panthers directly supported countless movements abroad and in turn got support as well. Conclusion. This may have been an unnecessarily long video, but I hope it helps give at least a general picture of our approach. This isn't a step-by-step guide to revolution, but more of a primer to the very first blocks you can put in.
ASMR leftist readings. Well, congratulations if you made it to the last chapter.
This is a guided meditation on peace, presentness, and political revolution. Find a place where you can sit comfortably, perhaps resting your hands on your knees. You may wish to sit on the floor with your legs crossed. Or, if you're not too tired, you may like to lie down on your back. Whatever position suits you. Make sure that your chest is open, and you may wish to allow your eyes to gently close, or find a point in the room where you can rest your focus. Begin by noticing your breathing. Feel your chest rising and falling, your belly expanding in and out. You don't have to change the way you breathe, just becoming aware of it. In and out. Notice also that society can be thought of as being made up of groups of people with conflicting and irreconcilable economic interests, which we call classes. You don't have to change society in this moment. This is your moment, your time. Just notice class conflict and be aware of it. This will be our anchor as we proceed on this journey. And now, let's take 3 deep, relaxing breaths. As you release the air in your lungs, you may wish to repeat in your mind the topics of today's meditation. And with each breath, I invite you to experience a doubling of your relaxation. Let's take the first of these 3 breaths. Now, breathing in peace and out. Very good. Breathing normally in between, becoming even more relaxed with each breath. Let's take the second breath. Now, in presentness and release. Fantastic job. Aware of your chest rising and falling. Let's take the third and final breath. Now, breathing in political revolution and out. Well done. Don't worry if your breathing doesn't match the sound of my voice. It is all good, and it is all okay. Just becoming even more aware of breath, and beginning slowly to relax. As we breathed those 3 relaxing breaths, sensation spreading from the top of your head down through your shoulders, arms, chest, right out the tips of your toes. This sensation is available to you throughout this meditation, whenever you desire. Don't be distressed or upset if you become distracted by thoughts or sounds in the room. Just keep coming back to breath. The world can be chaotic, and we can lose focus when we think about what we might like to change, or something we wish we could control. But just invite yourself to come back to breath and the model of class conflict. Breathing in and out. As you sink deeper and deeper into this relaxed state of awareness, you may begin to notice the position of your body, the surfaces you are in contact with, the temperature of the room, and you may also notice your body's position in the system of global capitalism. And the air continues to flow, becoming even more relaxed, even more aware. Now, in this relaxed state, we are ready to consider the revolution. As you breathe in and out, receive an invitation to the idea that revolution will look different for you if you are in a bourgeois nation enriched by global capitalism than it might for someone in a country impoverished by it. Returning always to breath and class conflict. When we think about revolution, we may imagine it as destructive or violent. We may conjure images of past revolutions that we think fell short, or make jokes about sending landlords and capitalists to violent ends. We may shy away from this image, whether because we are liberals rather than socialists, or because we were raised in liberal capitalist societies that maintain a hold on our thoughts, or perhaps out of compassion and love for our fellow human beings, whoever they may be. Whatever the reason, we may desire to avoid revolution, but simply agitate for reform within capitalist society while maintaining its comforts. But although revolution means a break with the old ways of doing things, it need not be fundamentally destructive, but instead an act of creation. It may be scary or painful, like bringing a new child into the world, but it is the birthing of a new way of life, rather than the gradual managing of decay and bargaining with entropy that liberal democracy has become. This is not to say that we cannot learn from our mistakes or come to an understanding of history. Simply that, in considering the revolution, we want our focus to be on the present and not our anxieties about the past. judge yourself if you have doubts. Simply observe them and let them go. We may become anxious or depressed when we ruminate on the past and witness the destruction and pain that can seem to surround us. We can be upset by the wickedness of others and wonder how it is that human beings can have done so many awful things to each other or the planet. Conversely, we may rejoice at small changes that we have managed to win in the past through elections and trade unions in the struggle for a fairer world. But the past is not real and exists only in our memories, in the present, where breath and class conflict remain, and where we want our focus to be. Breathing in, peace, and out. Each breath deepening your relaxation and your awareness. When we are not dwelling on the past, we often project our thoughts about revolution into the future, as if it will be some messianic event waiting just out of reach that will save us from the frightening things in our world. But the future also does not exist. It is only anticipation in the present moment. When we think of the revolution as a specific event, like an armed uprising that will take place in the future, we can become concerned about whether our actions take us closer to our idea of that event or farther away. We may become fixated on the purity of our vision, focusing only on the ideal, classless future, and neglecting other forms of oppression that others struggle against in the here and now. Or we may become anxious, thinking that it is an impossible task, or that we would have nothing to contribute, imagining instead that the future revolution will be led by anti-fascist catgirls or revolutionary daddies who will do the fighting for us. This can turn us against each other, or make us doubt ourselves, wondering whether what we or those around us are doing is truly revolutionary or merely reform. It is okay to have these doubts. Simply recognize them and return to the present moment, to breath, and the desire to abolish the class system. By noticing and letting go of doubts, and not judging ourselves or others for having them, we become prepared to take and wield power in the present, to neither retreat into ruminating on how we have been hurt in the past by the current political system, nor project our desire for change onto imaginary future heroes, but instead When we look at the revolution either as a distant project of the future or the redemption of the past, we often imagine it as a moral crusade, springing from the best impulses of our hearts, and someday bringing about a lasting justice. But this way of thinking can also bind us and stop us from seeing a way forward in the present. It is easy to become overwhelmed or disappointed when our own sense of justice is not met, and to become concerned with how the resources of our world are distributed, rather than the conditions under which they are extracted and produced. We stray from the present and class conflict, and it is easy to conflate our moral desire for a better world with the ideals of participation in bourgeois democracies in which we are raised. That is not to say that we must abandon our moral ideals or close our hearts to democratic participation or the suffering of others, or that our smaller efforts to make the world a better place are necessarily a misuse of our time. It is merely to appreciate that a revolution is more than a change in the distribution of goods, or a struggle to get a slightly fairer deal. It is the struggle to abolish the causes of that injustice, not merely its symptoms, which are fleeting and can flare up chaotically as long as class conflict persists. Breathing in, political revolution, and out, aware of your chest, your belly, that tingling sensation in your head, shoulders, chest, and down through your legs. You may become aware that you are holding tension in your neck, or your jaw, or cognitive tension brought about by trying to reconcile the internal contradictions of capitalism. With your next breath, just invite any tense muscles to let go. In a moment, we will count backwards from 5 and gradually return to our normal awareness. But first, take a moment to suspend yourself in this relaxed state, as if deep in an ocean. The waves sway overhead, but you are still and calm. And now we will begin to surface with 5 short phrases. You may wish to repeat them in your mind or out loud, whatever is best for you. Beginning with 5. I am aware of my breath. 4. I am aware of my body, becoming more aware with each breath. 3. I am aware of class conflict, breathing in and out with 2. I am aware of the revolutionary finally, 1. I embrace revolution in the present moment. Fantastic job. If you wish, you can stay in this relaxed state for as long as you desire. Or you may wish to continue your day renewed with this energy. Just remember to allow your awareness to always return to breath and the present moment, and the desire to abolish the class system. This meditation was written and performed by Oliver Thorne and recorded with the help of Manbros Media. Patreon.com/philosophytube is where you can.
Years since the founding of the party, the development, consolidation, and Bolshevization of our party have proceeded in the midst of revolutionary wars. Without armed struggle, the Communist Party would assuredly not be what it is today. Comrades throughout the party must never forget this experience for which we have paid in blood. End quote. Introducing the Communist. October 4th, 1939. Quote, according to the Marxist theory of the state, the army is the chief component of state power. Whoever wants to seize and retain state power must have a strong army. Some people ridicule us as advocates of the omnipotence of war. Yes, we are advocates of the omnipotence of revolutionary war. That is good, not bad. It is Marxist. The guns of the Russian Communist Party created socialism. We shall create a democratic republic. Experience in the class struggle in the era of imperialism teaches us that it is only by the power of the gun that the working class and the laboring masses can defeat the armed bourgeoisie and landlords. In this sense, we may say that only with guns can the whole world be transformed. End quote. Problems of War and Strategy, November 6, 1938. Quote, we are advocates of the abolition of war. We do not want war, but war can only be abolished through war. And in order to get rid of the gun, it is necessary to take up the gun. War, this monster of mutual slaughter among men, will finally be eliminated by the progress of human society, and in the not too distant future too. But there is only one way to eliminate it, and that is to oppose war with war. To oppose counter-revolutionary war with revolutionary war. To oppose national counter-revolutionary war with national revolutionary war. And to oppose counter-revolutionary class war with revolutionary class war. When human society advances to the point where classes and states are eliminated, there will be no more wars, counter-revolutionary or revolutionary, unjust or just. That will be the era of perpetual peace for mankind. Our study of the laws of revolutionary war springs from the desire to eliminate all wars. Herein lies the distinction between us communists and all the exploiting classes. End quote. Problems of strategy in China's Revolutionary War, December 1936. Quote, "Our country and all the other socialist countries want peace. So do the people of all the countries of the world. The ones who crave war and do not want peace are certain monopoly capitalist groups and a handful of imperialist countries which depend on aggression for their profits." End quote. Opening address at the 8th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, September 15th, 1956. Quote, "To achieve a lasting world peace, we must further develop our friendship and cooperation with the fraternal countries in the socialist camp and strengthen our solidarity with all peace-loving countries. We must endeavor to establish normal diplomatic relations on the basis of mutual respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty and of equality and mutual benefit, with all countries willing to live together with us in peace. We must give active support to the national independence and liberation movement in countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, as well as to the peace movement and to just struggles in all the countries of the world. As for the imperialist countries, we should unite with their peoples and strive to coexist peacefully with those countries, do business with them and prevent any possible war. But under no circumstances should we harbor any unrealistic notions about them." End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people, February 27th, 1957. Quote, "We desire peace. However, if imperialism insists on fighting a war, we will have no alternative but to take the firm resolution to fight to the finish before going ahead with our construction. If you are afraid of war day in, day out, what will you do if war eventually comes? First, I said that the east wind is prevailing over the west wind and war will not break out. And now I have added these explanations about the situation in case war should break out. Both possibilities have thus been taken into account." End quote. Speech at the Moscow meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties, November 18th, 1957. Quote, "People all over the world are now discussing whether or not a third world war will break out. On this question, too, we must be mentally prepared and do some analysis. We stand firmly for peace and against war. But if the imperialists insist on unleashing another war, we should not be afraid of it. Our attitude on this question is the same as our attitude towards any disturbance. First, we are against it. Second, we are not afraid of it. The First World War was followed by the birth of the Soviet Union with a population of 200 million. The Second World War was followed by the emergence of the socialist camp with a combined population of 900 million. If the imperialists insist on launching a third world war, it is certain that several hundred million more will turn to socialism, and then there will not be much room left on Earth for the imperialists. It is also likely that the whole structure of imperialism will utterly collapse." End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people, February 27, 1957. Quote, "Make trouble, fail, make trouble again, fail again, till they're doomed. That is the logic of the imperialists and all reactionaries the world over in dealing with the people's cause, and they will never go against this logic. This is a Marxist law. When we say imperialism is ferocious, we mean that its nature will never change, that the imperialists will never lay down their butcher knives, that they will never become Buddhas till they're doomed. Fight, fail, fight again, fail again, fight again, till their victory. That is the logic of the people, and they too will never go against this logic. This is another Marxist law. The Russian People's Revolution followed this law, and so has the Chinese People's Revolution." End quote. Cast away illusions. Prepare for struggle. August 14th, 1949. Quote, "Just because we have won victory, we must never relax our vigilance against the frenzied plots for revenge by the imperialists and their running dogs. Whoever relaxes vigilance will disarm himself politically and would land himself in a passive position. End quote. Address to the Preparatory Committee of the New Political Consultative Conference, June 15th, 1949. Quote, the imperialists and their running dogs, the Chinese reactionaries, will not resign themselves to defeat in this land of China. They will continue to gang up against the Chinese people in every possible way. For example, they will smuggle their agents into China to sow dissension and make trouble. That is certain. They will never neglect these activities. To take another example, the imperialists will incite the Chinese reactionaries and even throw in their own forces to blockade China's ports. They will do this as long as it is possible. Furthermore, if they still hanker after adventures, they will send some of their troops to invade and harass China's frontiers. This, too, is not impossible. All this we must take fully into account. The world is progressing. The future is bright and no one can change this general trend of history. We should carry on constant propaganda among the people on the facts of world progress and the bright future ahead, so that they will build their confidence in victory. End quote. On the Chungking negotiations, October 17, 1945. Quote, the commanders and fighters of the entire Chinese People's Liberation Army absolutely must not relax in the least their will to fight. Any thinking that relaxes the will to fight and belittles the enemy is wrong. End quote. Report to the Second Plenary Session of the 7th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, March 5th, 1949. Chapter 6. Imperialism and all reactionaries are paper tigers. Quote, all reactionaries are paper tigers. In appearance, the reactionaries are terrifying, but in reality, they are not so powerful. From a long-term point of view, it is not the reactionaries, but the people who are really powerful. End quote. Talk with the American correspondent Anna Louise Strong, August 1946. Quote, just as there is not a single thing in the world without a dual nature, this is the law of the unity of opposites, so imperialism and all reactionaries have a dual nature. They are real tigers and paper tigers at the same time. In past history, before they won state power and for some time afterwards, the slave-owning class, the feudal landlord class, and the bourgeoisie were vigorous, revolutionary, and progressive. They were real tigers. But with the lapse of time, because their opposites, the slave class, the peasant class, and the proletariat, grew in strength step by step, struggled against them more and more fiercely. These ruling classes changed step by step into the reverse, changed into reactionaries, changed into backward people, changed into paper tigers. And eventually they were overthrown, or will be overthrown, by the people. The reactionary, backward decaying classes retained this dual nature even in their last life and death struggles against the people. On the one hand, they were real tigers. They devoured people by the millions and tens of millions. The cause of the people's struggle went through a period of difficulties and hardships, and along the path there were many twists and turns. To destroy the rule of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism in China took the Chinese people more than 100 years and cost them tens of millions of lives before the victory in 1949. Look, were these not living tigers? Iron tigers. Real tigers. But in the end, they changed into paper tigers. Dead tigers. Bean curd tigers. These are historical facts. Have people not seen or heard about these facts? There have indeed been thousands and tens of thousands of them. Thousands and tens of thousands. Hence, imperialism and all reactionaries looked at in essence from a long-term point of view, from a strategic point of view, must be seen for what they are. Paper tigers. On this, we should build our strategic thinking. On the other hand, they are also living tigers, iron tigers, real tigers which can devour people. On this, we should build our tactical thinking. End quote. Speech at the Wucheng meeting of the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, December 1st, 1958. Quote, I have said that all reputedly powerful reactionaries are merely paper tigers. The reason is that they are divorced from the people. Look, was not Hitler a paper tiger? Was Hitler not overthrown? I also said that the Tsar of Russia, the Emperor of China, and Japanese imperialism were all paper tigers. As we know, they were all overthrown. US imperialism has not yet been overthrown, and it has the atom bomb. I believe it also will be overthrown. It, too, is a paper tiger. Speech at the Moscow meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties, November 18th, 1957. Quote, lifting a rock only to drop it on one's own feet is a Chinese folk saying to describe the behavior of certain fools. The reactionaries in all countries are fools of this kind. In the final analysis, their persecution of the revolutionary people only serves to accelerate the people's revolutions on a broader and more intense scale. Did not the persecution of the revolutionary people by the Tsar of Russia and by Chiang Kai-shek perform this function in the Great Russian and Chinese revolutions? End quote. Speech at the meeting of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR in celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Great October Socialist Revolution, November 6th, 1957. Quote, U.S. imperialism invaded China's territory of Taiwan and has occupied it for the past 9 years. A short while ago, it sent its armed forces to invade and occupy Lebanon. The United States has set up hundreds of military bases in many countries all over the world. China's territory of Taiwan, Lebanon, and all military bases of the United States on foreign soil are so many nooses around the neck of U.S. imperialism. The nooses have been fashioned by the Americans themselves and by nobody else. And it is they themselves who have put these nooses around their own necks, handing the ends of the ropes to the Chinese people. The people of the Arab countries and all the peoples of the world who love peace and oppose aggression. The longer the U.S. aggressors remain in those places, the tighter the nooses around their necks will become. End quote. Speech at the Supreme State Conference, September 8th, 1959. Quote, imperialism will not last long because it always does evil things. It persists in grooming and supporting the reactionaries in all countries who are against the people. It has forcibly seized many colonies and semi-colonies and many military bases, and it threatens the peace with atomic war. Thus, forced by imperialism to do so, more than 90% of the people of the world are rising or will rise up in struggle against it. Yet imperialism is still alive, still running amok in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. In the West, imperialism is still oppressing the people at home. This situation must change. It is the task of the people of the whole world to put an end to the aggression and oppression perpetrated by imperialism and chiefly by U.S. imperialism. End quote. Interview with the Xinhua news agency correspondent, September 19th, 1958. Quote, riding roughshod everywhere, U.S. imperialism has made itself the enemy of the people of the world and has increasingly isolated itself. Those who refuse to be enslaved will never be cowed by the atom bombs and hydrogen bombs in the hands of the U.S. imperialists. The raging tide of the people of the world against the U.S. aggressors is irresistible. Their struggle against U.S. imperialism and its lackeys will assuredly win still greater victories. End quote. Statement supporting the Panamanian people's just patriotic struggle against U.S. imperialism. January 12th, 1964. Quote, if the U.S. monopoly capitalist groups persist in pushing their politics of aggression and war, the day is bound to come when they will be hanged by the people of the whole world. The same fate awaits the accomplices of the United States. End quote. Speech at the Supreme State Conference, September 8, 1959. Quote, over a long period, we have developed this concept for the struggle against the enemy. Strategically, we should despise all our enemies, but tactically, we should take them seriously. This also means that we must despise the enemy with respect to the whole, but that we must take him seriously with respect to each and every concrete question. If we do not despise the enemy with respect to the whole, we shall be committing the error of opportunism. Marx and Engels were only two individuals. And yet in those early days, they already declared that capitalism would be overthrown throughout the world. But in dealing with concrete problems and particular enemies, we shall be committing the error of adventurism unless we take them seriously. In war, battles can only be fought one by one, and the enemy forces can only be destroyed one by one. Factories can only be built one by one. The peasants can only plow the land plot by plot. The same is even true of eating a meal. Strategically, we take the eating of a meal lightly. We know we can finish it. But actually, we eat it mouthful by mouthful. It is impossible to swallow an entire banquet in one gulp. This is known as a piecemeal solution. In military parlance, it is called wiping out the enemy forces one by one. End quote. Speech at the Moscow meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties, November 18th, 1957. Quote, "It is my opinion that the international situation has now reached a new turning point. There are two winds in the world today, the east wind and the west wind. There is a Chinese saying, either the east wind prevails over the west wind, or the west wind prevails over the east wind. I believe it is characteristic of the situation today that the east wind is prevailing over the west wind. That is to say, the forces of socialism have become overwhelmingly superior to the forces of imperialism." End quote. Chapter 7. Dare to struggle and dare to win. Quote, "People of the world, unite and defeat the U.S. aggressors and all their running dogs. People of the world, be courageous, dare to fight, defy difficulties, and advance wave upon wave. Then the whole world will belong to the people. Monsters of all kinds shall be destroyed." End quote. Statement supporting the people of the Congo against U.S. aggression, November 28, 1964. Quote, "The Communist Party of China, having made a clear-headed appraisal of the international and domestic situation on the basis of the science of Marxism-Leninism, recognized that all attacks by the reactionaries at home and abroad had to be defeated and could be defeated. When dark clouds appeared in the sky, we pointed out that they were only temporary, that the darkness would soon pass and the sun break through." End quote. The present situation and our tasks, December 25th, 1947. Quote, "Historically, all reactionary forces on the verge of extinction invariably conduct a last, desperate struggle against the revolutionary forces, and some revolutionaries are apt to be deluded for a time by this phenomenon of outward strength but inner weakness, failing to grasp the essential fact that the enemy is nearing extinction while they themselves are approaching victory." End quote. The turning point in World War II, October 12th, 1942. Quote, "If they, the Kuomintang, fight, we will wipe them out completely. This is the way things are. If they attack and we wipe them out, they will have that satisfaction. Wipe out some satisfaction. Wipe out more satisfaction. Wipe out the whole lot, complete satisfaction. China's problems are complicated, and our brains must also be a little complicated. If they start fighting, we fight back. Fight to win peace." End quote. On the Chungking negotiations, October 17th, 1945. Quote, "If anyone attacks us, and if the conditions are favorable for battle, we will certainly act in self-defense to wipe him out resolutely, thoroughly, wholly, and completely. We do not strike rashly, but when we do strike, we must win. We must never be cowed by the bluster of reactionaries." End quote. On peace negotiations with the Kuomintang, circular of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, August 16th, 1945. Quote, "As far as our own desire is concerned, we don't want to fight even for a single day. But if circumstances force us to fight, we can fight to the finish." End quote. Talk with the American correspondent Anna Louise Strong, August 1946. Quote, "We are for peace, but so long as U.S. imperialism refuses to give up its arrogant and unreasonable demands and its scheme to extend aggression, The only course for the Chinese people is to remain determined to go on fighting side by side with the Korean people. Not that we are warlike. We are willing to stop the war at once and leave the remaining questions for later settlement. But U.S. imperialism is not willing to do so. All right then, let the fighting go on. However many years U.S. imperialism wants to fight, we are ready to fight right up to the moment when it is willing to stop. Right up to the moment of complete victory for the Chinese and Korean peoples. End quote. Speech at the 4th session of the First National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, February 7th, 1953. Quote, "We should rid our ranks of all impotent thinking. All views that overestimate the strength of the enemy and underestimate the strength of the people are wrong." End quote. The present situation and our tasks, December 25th, 1947. Quote, "The oppressed peoples and nations must not pin their hopes for liberation on the sensibleness of imperialism and its lackeys. They will only triumph by strengthening their unity and persevering in their struggle." End quote. Statement opposing aggression against southern Vietnam and slaughter of its people by the U.S. Nojing Dim Click, August 29th, 1963. Quote, "No matter when this countrywide civil war breaks out, we must be well prepared. If it comes early, say tomorrow morning, we should be prepared. That is point one. In the present international and domestic situation, it is possible that for a time the Civil War may be kept restricted in scale and localized. That is point two. Chapter 8. People's War. Quote, "The Revolutionary War is a war of the masses. It can be waged only by mobilizing the masses and relying on them." End quote. Be concerned with the well-being of the masses. Pay attention to methods of work. January 27th, 1934. Quote, "What is a true bastion of iron? It is the masses, the millions upon millions of people who genuinely and sincerely support the revolution. That is the real iron bastion which it is impossible, and absolutely impossible, for any force on earth to smash. The counter-revolution cannot smash us. On the contrary, we shall smash it. Rallying millions upon millions of people round the revolutionary government and expanding our revolutionary war, we shall wipe out all counter-revolution and take over the whole of China. The richest source of power to wage war lies in the masses of the people. It is mainly because of the unorganized state of the Chinese masses that Japan dares to bully us. When this defect is remedied, then the Japanese aggressor, like a mad bull crashing into a ring of flames, will be surrounded by hundreds of millions of our people standing upright. The mere sound of their voices will strike terror into him, and he will be burned to death." End quote. On Protracted War, May 1938. Quote, "The imperialists are bullying us in such a way that we will have to deal with them seriously. Not only must we have a powerful regular army, we must also organize contingents of the people's militia on a big scale. This will make it difficult for the imperialists to move a single inch in our country in the event of invasion." End quote. Interview with a Xinhua news agency correspondent, September 29th, 1958. Quote, "Considering the Revolutionary War as a whole, the operations of the people's guerrillas and those of the main forces of the Red Army complement each other like a man's right arm and left arm. And if we had only the main forces of the Red Army without the people's guerrillas, we would be like a warrior with only one arm. In concrete terms, and especially with regard to military operations, when we talk of the people in the base area as a factor, we mean that we have an armed people. That is the main reason why the enemy is afraid to approach our base area." End quote. Problems of strategy in China's Revolutionary War, December 1936. Quote, "Unquestionably, victory or defeat in war is determined mainly by the military, political, economic, and natural conditions on both sides. But not by these alone. It is also determined by each side's subjective ability in directing the war. In his endeavor to win a war, a military strategist cannot overstep the limitations imposed by the material conditions. Within these conditions, however, He can and must strive for victory. The stage of action for a military strategist is built upon objective material conditions. But on that stage, he can direct the performance of many a drama, full of sound and color, power and grandeur. The object of war is specifically to preserve oneself and destroy the enemy. To destroy the enemy means to disarm him or deprive him of the power to resist. It does not mean to destroy every member of his forces physically. In ancient warfare, the spear and the shield were used. The spear to attack and destroy the enemy, and the shield to defend and preserve oneself. To the present day, all weapons are still an extension of the spear and the shield. The bomber, the machine gun, the long-range gun and poison gas are developments of the spear, while the air raid shelter, the steel helmet, the concrete fortification and the gas mask are developments of the shield. The tank is a new weapon combining the functions of both spear and shield. Attack is the chief means of destroying the enemy, but defense cannot be dispensed with. In attack, the immediate object is to destroy the enemy, but at the same time it is self-preservation, because if the enemy is not destroyed, you will be destroyed. In defense, the immediate objective is to preserve yourself, but at the same time, defense is a means of supplementing attack or preparing to go over to the attack. Retreat is in the category of defense and is a continuation of defense, while pursuit is a continuation of attack. It should be pointed out that destruction of the enemy is the primary object of war, and self-preservation the secondary, because only by destroying the enemy in large numbers can one effectively preserve oneself. Therefore, attack, the chief means of destroying the enemy, is primary, while defense, the supplementary means of destroying the enemy and a means of self-preservation, is secondary. In actual warfare, the chief role is played by defense much of the time and by attack for the rest of the time. But if war is taken as a whole, attack remains primary. End quote. On Protracted War, May 1938. Quote, all the guiding principles of military operations grow out of the one basic principle, to strive to the utmost to preserve one's own strength and destroy that of the enemy. How then do we justify the encouragement of heroic sacrifice in war? Every war exacts a price, sometimes an extremely high one. Is this not in contradiction with preserving oneself? In fact, there is no contradiction at all. To put it more exactly, sacrifice and self-preservation are both opposite and complementary to each other. For such sacrifice is essential not only for destroying the enemy, but also for preserving oneself, partial and temporary non-preservation. Sacrifice, or paying the price, is necessary for the sake of general and permanent preservation. From this basic principle stems the series of principles guiding military operations, all of which, from the principles of shooting, taking cover to preserve oneself, and making full use of firepower to destroy the enemy, to the principles of strategy, are permeated with the spirit of this basic principle. All technical principles are all principles concerning tactics, campaigns, and strategy represent applications of this basic principle. The principle of preserving oneself and destroying the enemy is the basis of all military principles. End quote. Problems of strategy in guerrilla war against Japan, May 1938. Quote, our principles of operation are 1. Attack dispersed. Isolated enemy forces first. Attack concentrated, strong enemy forces later. 2. Take small and medium cities and extensive rural areas first. Take big cities later. 3. Make wiping out the enemy's effective strength our main objective. Do not make holding or seizing a city or place our main objective. Holding or seizing a city or place is the outcome of wiping out the enemy's effective strength, and often a city or place can be held or seized for good only after it has changed hands a number of times. 4. In every battle, concentrate an absolutely superior force. 2, 3, 4, and sometimes even 5 or 6 times the enemy's strength. Encircle the enemy forces completely. Strive to wipe them out thoroughly, and do not let any escape from the net. In special circumstances, use the method of dealing the enemy crushing blows. That is, concentrate all our strength to make a frontal attack and an attack on one or both of his flanks, with the aim of wiping out one part and routing another so that our army can swiftly move its troops to smash other enemy forces. Strive to avoid battles of attrition in which we lose more than we gain or only break even. In this way, although inferior as a whole, in terms of numbers, we shall be absolutely superior in every part, in every specific campaign, and this ensures victory in the campaign. As time goes on, we shall become superior as a whole and eventually wipe out all the enemy. 5. Fight no battle unprepared. Fight no battle you are not sure of winning. Make every effort to be well prepared for each battle. Make every effort to ensure victory in the given set of conditions as between the enemy and ourselves. 6. Give full play to our style of fighting. Courage in battle. No fear of sacrifice. No fear of fatigue. And continuous fighting. That is, fighting successive battles in a short time without rest. 7. Strive to wipe out the enemy when he's on the move. At the same time, pay attention to the tactics of positional attack and capture enemy fortified points and cities. 8. With regard to attacking cities, resolutely seize all enemy fortified points and cities which are weakly defended. At opportune moments, seize all enemy fortified points and cities defended with moderate strength, provided circumstances permit. As for all strongly defended enemy fortified points and cities, wait till conditions are right, and then take them. 9. Replenish our strength with all the arms and most of the personnel captured from the enemy. Our army's main sources of manpower and material are at the front. 10. Make good use of the intervals between campaigns to rest, train, and consolidate our troops. Periods of rest, training, and consolidation should not in general be very long, and the enemy should so far as possible be permitted no breathing space. These are the main methods of the People's Liberation Army has employed in defeating Chiang Kai-shek. They are the result of the tempering of the People's Liberation Army in long years of fighting against domestic and foreign enemies and are completely suited to our present situation. Our strategy and tactics are based on a people's war. No army opposed to the people can use our strategy and tactics. End quote. The present situation and our tasks. December 25th, 1947. Quote, without preparedness, superiority is not real superiority, and there can be no initiative either. Having grasped this point, a force which is inferior but prepared can often defeat a superior enemy by surprise attack. End quote. On Protracted War, May 1938. Chapter 9. People's Army. Quote, without a people's army, the people have nothing. End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, this army is powerful because all its members have a conscious discipline. They have come together and they fight not for the private interests of a few individuals or a narrow clique, but for the interests of the broad masses and of the whole nation.
From small paths permitting the passage of a mule to good roads for trucks.
In all this, the capacity of the organization of the rebel army must be kept in mind, as well as the offensive capacity of the enemy, who may destroy these constructions and even make use of roads built by his opponent to reach the encampments more easily. The fundamental rule should be that roads are for assisting supply in places where any other solution would be impossible. They should not be constructed except in circumstances where there is a virtual certainty that the position can be maintained against an attack by the adversary. Another exception would be roads built without great risk to facilitate communication between points that are not of vital importance. Furthermore, other means of communication may be established. One of these that is extremely important is the telephone. This can be strung in the forest with the convenience that arises from using trees for posts. There is the advantage that they are not visible to the enemy from above. The telephone also presupposes a zone that the enemy cannot penetrate. The Council, or Central Department of Justice, Revolutionary Laws, and Administration, is one of the vital features of a guerrilla army fully constituted, and with territory of its own. The council should be under the charge of an individual who knows the laws of the country. If he understands the necessities of the zone from a juridical point of view, this is better yet. He can proceed to prepare a series of decrees and regulations that help the peasant to normalize and institutionalize his life within the rebel zone. For example, during our experience in the Cuban War, we issued a penal code, a civil code, rules for supplying the peasantry, and rules of the agrarian reform. Subsequently, the laws fixing qualifications of candidates in the elections that were to be held later throughout the country were established. Also, the agrarian reform law of the Sierra Maestra. The council is likewise in charge of accounting operations for the guerrilla column or columns. It is responsible for handling money problems and at times intervenes directly in supply. All these recommendations are flexible. They are based upon an experience in a certain place and are conditioned by its geography and history. They will be modified in different geographical, historical, and social situations. In addition to the council, it is necessary to keep the general health of the zone in mind. This can be done by means of central military hospitals that should give the most complete assistance possible to the whole peasantry. Whether adequate medical treatment can be given will depend upon the stage reached by the revolution. Civil hospitals and civil health administration are united directly with the guerrilla army, and their functions are performed by officers and men of the army who have the dual function of caring for the people and orienting them toward better health. The big health problems among people in these conditions are rooted in their total ignorance of elementary principles of hygiene. This aggravates their already precarious situation. The collection of taxes, as I have already said, is also a function of the General Council. Warehouses are very important. As soon as a place is taken that is to serve as a base for the guerrilla band, warehouses should be established in the most orderly fashion possible. These will serve to assure a minimum care of merchandise, and most important, will provide the control needed for equalizing distribution and keeping it equitable at later times. Functions are different on the external front both in quantity and in quality. For example, propaganda should be of a national, orienting type, explaining the victories obtained by the guerrilla band, calling workers and peasants to effective mass fights, and giving news, if there is any, of victories obtained on this front itself. Solicitation of funds is completely secret. It ought to be carried out with the greatest care possible, isolating small collectors in the chain completely from the treasurer of the organization. This organization should be distributed in zones that complement each other in order to form a totality. Zones that may be provinces, states, cities, and villages, depending on the magnitude of the movement. In each of them, there must be a finance commission that takes charge of the disposal of funds collected. It is possible to collect money by selling bonds, or through direct donations. When the development of the struggle is more advanced, taxes may be collected. When industries come to recognize the great force that the insurrectional army possesses, they will consent to pay. Supply procurement should be fitted to the necessities of the guerrilla bands. It will be organized in the form of a chain of merchandise in such a way that the more common articles are procured in nearby places, and the things that are really scarce or impossible to procure locally in larger centers. The effort always is to keep the chain as limited as possible, known to the smallest number of men. It can thus perform its mission for a longer time. Sabotage should be directed by the civil organization in the external sector in coordination with the central command. In special circumstances, after careful analysis, assaults on persons will be used. In general, we consider that this is not desirable, except for the purpose of eliminating some figure who is notorious for his villainies against the people, and the virulence of his repression. Our experience in the Cuban struggle shows that it would have been possible to save the lives of numerous fine comrades who were sacrificed in the performance of missions of small value. Several times these ended with enemy bullets of reprisal on combatants whose loss could not be compared with the results obtained. Assaults and terrorism in indiscriminate form should not be employed. More preferable an effort directed at large concentrations of people in whom the revolutionary idea can be planted and nurtured, so that at a critical moment they can be mobilized, and with the help of the armed forces contribute to a favorable balance on the side of the revolution. For this, it is necessary also to make use of popular organizations of workers, professional people, and peasants, who work at sowing the seed of the revolution among their respective masses, explaining, providing revolutionary publications for reading, teaching the truth. One of the characteristics of revolutionary propaganda must be truth. Little by little, in this way, the masses will be won over. Those among them who do the best work may be chosen for incorporation into the rebel army, or assignment to other tasks of great responsibility. This is the outline of civil organization within and outside guerrilla territory at a time of popular struggle. There are possibilities of perfecting all these features to a high degree. I repeat once more, it is our Cuban experience which speaks through me. New experiences can vary and improve these concepts. We offer an outline, not a Bible. 3. The role of the woman. The part that the woman can play in the development of a revolutionary process is of extraordinary importance. It is well to emphasize this, since in all our countries, with their colonial mentality, there is a certain underestimation of the woman which becomes a real discrimination against her. The woman is capable of performing the most difficult tasks of fighting beside the men, and despite current belief, she does not create conflicts of a sexual type in the troops. In the rigorous combatant life, the woman is a companion who brings the qualities appropriate to her sex, but she can work the same as a man, and she can fight. She is weaker, but no less resistant than he. She can perform every class of combat task that a man can, at a given moment, and on certain occasions in the Cuban struggle, she performed a relief role. Naturally, the combatant women are a minority. When the internal front is being consolidated, and it is desirable to remove as many combatants as possible who do not possess indispensable physical characteristics, the women can be assigned a considerable number of specific occupations, of which one of the most important, perhaps the most important, is communication between different combatant forces, above all between those that are in enemy territory. The transport of objects, messages, or money of small size and great importance should be confided to women in whom the guerrilla army has absolute confidence. Women can transport them using 1,000 tricks. It is a fact that however brutal the repression, however thorough the searching, the woman receives a less harsh treatment than the man, and can carry her message or other object of an important or confidential character to its destination. As a simple messenger, either by word of mouth or of writing, the woman can always perform her task with more freedom than the man, attracting less attention, and at the same time inspiring less fear of danger in the enemy soldier. He who commits brutalities acts frequently under the impulse of fear or apprehension that he himself will be attacked, since this is one form of action in guerrilla warfare. Contacts between separated forces, messages to the exterior of the lines, even to the exterior of the country. Also, objects of considerable size, such as bullets, are transported by women in special belts worn beneath their skirts. But also in this stage, a woman can perform her habitual tasks of peacetime. It is very pleasing to a soldier subjected to the extremely hard conditions of this life to be able to look forward to a seasoned meal which tastes like something. One of the great tortures of the war was eating a cold, sticky, tasteless mess. The woman as cook can greatly improve the diet, and furthermore, it is easier to keep her in these domestic tasks. One of the problems in guerrilla bands is that all works of a civilian character are scorned by those who perform them. They are constantly trying to get out of these tasks in order to enter into forces that are actively in combat. A task of great importance for women is to teach beginning reading, including revolutionary theory, primarily to the peasants of the zone, but also to the revolutionary soldiers. The organization of schools, which is a part of the civil organization, should be done principally through women, who arouse more enthusiasm among children and enjoy more affection from the school community. Likewise, when the fronts have been consolidated and a rear exists, the functions of the social worker also fall to women, who investigate the various economic and social evils of the zone, with a view to changing them as far as possible. The woman plays an important part in medical matters as nurse, and even as doctor, with a gentleness infinitely superior to that of her rude companion in arms, a gentleness that is so much appreciated at moments when a man is helpless, without comforts, perhaps suffering severe pain and exposed to the many dangers of all classes that are a part of this type of war. Once the stage of creating small war industries has begun, the woman can also contribute here, especially in the manufacture of uniforms, a traditional employment of women in Latin American countries. With a simple sewing machine and a few patterns, she can perform marvels. Women can take part in all lines of civil organization. They can replace men perfectly well, and all to do so, even where persons are needed for carrying weapons. Though this is a rare accident in guerrilla life, it is important to give adequate indoctrination to men and women, in order to avoid all kinds of misbehavior that can operate to hurt the morale of the troops. But persons who are otherwise free and who love each other should be permitted to marry in the Sierra and live as man and wife after complying with the simple requirements of the guerrilla band. 4. Medical problems. One of the grave problems that confronts the guerrilla fighter is exposure to the accidents of his life, especially to wounds and sicknesses, which are very frequent in guerrilla warfare. The doctor performs a function of extraordinary importance in the guerrilla band, not only in saving lives, in which many times his scientific intervention does not count because of the limited resources available to him, but also in the task of reinforcing the patient morally and making him feel that there is a person near him who is dedicated with all his force to minimizing his pains. He gives the wounded or sick the security of knowing that a person will remain at his side until he is cured or has passed danger. The organization of hospitals depends largely upon the stage of development of the guerrilla band. 3 fundamental types of hospital organization corresponding to various stages can be mentioned. In this development, we have a first nomadic phase. In it, the doctor, if there is one, travels constantly with his companions, is just another man. He will probably have to perform all the other functions of the guerrilla fighter, including that of fighting, and will suffer at times the depressing and desperate task of treating cases in which the means of saving life is not available. This is the stage in which the doctor has the most influence over the troops, the greatest importance for their morale. During this period in the development of the guerrilla band, the doctor achieves to the full his character of a true priest who seems to carry in his scantily equipped knapsack needed consolation for the men. The value of a simple aspirin to one who is suffering is beyond calculation, when it is given by the friendly hand of one who sympathetically makes the suffering his own. Therefore, the doctor in the first stage should be a man who is totally identified with the ideals of the revolution, because his words will affect the troops much more deeply than those spoken by any other member. In the normal course of events in guerrilla warfare, another stage is reached that could be called semi-nomadic. In it, there are encampments, more or less frequented by the guerrilla troops, friendly houses of complete confidence, where it is possible to store objects, and even leave the wounded, and a growing tendency for the troop to become settled. At this stage, the task of the doctor is less trying. He may have emergency surgical equipment in his knapsack, and another more complete outfit for less urgent operations in a friendly house. It is possible to leave the sick and wounded in the care of peasants, who will give their help with great devotion. He can also count on a larger number of medicines kept in convenient places. These should be completely cataloged as well as possible, considering the circumstances in which he lives. In this same semi-nomadic state, if the band operates in places that are absolutely inaccessible, hospitals can be established to which the sick and wounded will go for recovery. In the third stage, when there are zones invulnerable to the enemy, a true hospital organization is constructed. In its most developed form, it can consist of 3 centers of different types. In the combat category, there ought to be a doctor, the combatant the most loved by the troop, the man of battle, whose knowledge does not have to be too deep. I say this because his task is principally one of giving relief and of preparing the sick or wounded, while the real medical work is performed in hospitals more securely situated. A surgeon of quality ought not to be sacrificed in the line of fire. When a man falls in the front line, stretcher bearers, if these are available given the organization of the guerrilla band, will carry him to the first post. If they are not available, his companions themselves will perform this duty. Transport of the wounded in rough zones is one of the most delicate of all tasks, and one of the most painful experiences in a soldier's life. Perhaps the transport of a wounded man is harder on all concerned, because of his sufferings, and of the spirit of the sacrifice in the troop, than the fact itself of being wounded, however grave it may be. The transport can be carried out in different ways according to the characteristics of the ground. In rough and wooded places, which are typical in guerrilla warfare, it is necessary to walk single file. Here, the best system is to use a long pole with the patient carried in a hammock that hangs from it. The men take turns carrying the weight, one before and one behind. They should yield place to two other companions frequently, since the shoulders suffer severely, and the individual gradually wears himself out carrying this delicate and heavy burden. When the wounded soldier has passed through this first hospital, he then goes with the information as to what has been done for him to a second center, where there are surgeons and specialists depending upon the possibilities of the troop. Here, the more serious operations needed for saving life or relieving individuals from danger are performed. Afterwards, at a third level, hospitals with the greatest comforts possible are established for direct investigation in the zones affected of the causes and effects of illnesses that afflict the inhabitants of the area. These hospitals of the third group, which correspond to a sedentary life, are not only centers of convalescence and of operations of less urgency, but also establishments serving the civil population, where the hygienists perform their orienting function. Dispensaries that will permit an adequate individual surveillance should also be established. The hospitals of this third group can have, if the supply capability of the civil organization permits, a series of facilities that provide diagnosis, even with laboratory and X-ray facilities. Other useful individuals are the assistants to the doctor. They are generally youths with something of a vocation and some knowledge, with fairly strong physiques. They do not bear arms, sometimes because their vocation is medicine, but usually because there are insufficient arms for all who want them. These assistants will be in charge of carrying most of the medicines, an extra stretcher or hammock, if circumstances make this possible. They must take charge of the wounded in any battle that is fought. The necessary medicine should be obtained through contacts with health organizations that exist in territory of the enemy. Sometimes they can be obtained from such organizations as the International Red Cross. But this possibility should not be counted upon, especially in the first moments of the struggle. It is necessary to organize an apparatus that will permit rapid transport of needed medicines in case of danger, and that will gradually supply all the hospitals with the supplies needed for their work, military as well as civil. Also, contacts should be made in the surrounding areas with doctors who will be capable of helping the wounded, whose cases are beyond the capacities or the facilities of the guerrilla band. Doctors needed for this type of warfare are of different characteristics. The combatant doctor, the companion of men, is the type for the first stage. His functions develop as the action of the guerrilla band becomes more complicated, and a series of connected organisms are constructed. General surgeons are the best acquisitions for an army of this type. If an anesthetist is available, so much the better, though almost all operations are performed, not with gas anesthesia, but using largactil and sodium pentothal, which are much easier to administer and easier to procure and conserve. Besides general surgeons, bone specialists are very useful, because fractures occur frequently from accidents in the zone. Bullets producing this type of wound in limbs also frequently cause them. The clinic serves the peasant mass mainly, since, in general, sicknesses in the guerrilla armies are so easy of diagnosis as to be within the reach of anybody. The most difficult task is the cure of those produced by nutritional deficiencies. In a more advanced stage, there may even be laboratory technicians, if there are good hospitals, in order to have a complete outfit. Calls should be made to all sectors of the profession whose services are needed. It is quite likely that many will respond to this call and come to lend their help. Professionals of all classes are needed,
Surgeons are very useful. Dentists as well. Dentists should be advised to come with a simple campaign apparatus and a campaign-type drill. Working with this, they can do practically everything necessary. 5. Sabotage. Sabotage is one of the invaluable arms of a people that fights in guerrilla form. Its organization falls under the civil or clandestine branch. Since sabotage should be carried out, of course, only outside the territories dominated by the Revolutionary Army. But this organization should be directly commanded and oriented by the guerrilla staff of the guerrillas, which will be responsible for deciding the industries, communications, or other objectives that are to be attacked. Sabotage has nothing to do with terrorism. Terrorism and personal assaults are entirely different tactics. We sincerely believe that terrorism is of negative value, that it by no means produces the desired effects, that it can turn a people against a revolutionary movement, and that it can bring a loss of lives to its agents out of proportion to what it produces. On the other hand, attempts to take the lives of particular persons are to be made, though only in very special circumstances. This tactic should be used where it will eliminate a leader of the oppression. What ought never to be done is to employ specially trained, heroic, self-sacrificing human beings in eliminating a little assassin whose death can provoke the destruction and reprisal of all the revolutionaries employed, and even more. Sabotage should be of two types: sabotage on a national scale against determined objectives, and local sabotage against lines of combat. Sabotage on a national scale should be aimed principally at destroying communications. Each type of communication can be destroyed in a different way. All of them are vulnerable. For example, telegraph and telephone poles are easily destroyed by sawing them almost all the way through, so that at night they appear to be in normal condition. A sudden kick causes one pole to fall, and this drags along with it all those that are weak, producing a blackout of considerable extent. Bridges can be attacked with dynamite. If there is no dynamite, those made of steel can be made to fall very easily with an oxyacetylene blowtorch. A steel truss bridge should be cut in its main beam and in the upper beam from which the bridge hangs. When these two beams have been cut at one end with the torch, they are then cut at the opposite end. The bridge will fall completely on one side and will be twisted and destroyed. This is the most effective way to knock out a steel bridge without dynamite. Railroads should also be destroyed, as should roads and culverts. At times, trains should be blown up, if the power of the guerrilla band makes this possible. Utilizing the necessary equipment will also destroy the vital industries of each region at certain moments. In these cases, it is necessary to have an overall view of the problem, and to be sure that a center of work is not destroyed unless the moment is decisive, since this brings with it, as a consequence, massive unemployment of workers and hunger. The enterprises belonging to the potentates of the regime should be eliminated, and attempts made to convince the workers of the need for doing so, unless this will bring very grave social consequences. We reiterate the importance of sabotage against communications. The great strength of the enemy army against the rebels in the flatter zones is rapid communications. We must then constantly undermine that strength by knocking out railroad bridges, culverts, electric lights, telephones, also aqueducts, and in general everything that is necessary for a normal and modern life. Around the combat line, sabotage should be performed in the same way, but with much more audacity, and with much more dedication and frequency. Here it is possible to count on the invaluable aid of the flying patrols of the guerrilla army, which can descend into these zones and help the members of the civil organization perform a given task. Again, sabotage ought to be aimed principally at communications, but with much more persistence. All factories, all centers of production that are capable of giving the enemy something needed to maintain his offensive against the popular forces ought also to be liquidated. Emphasis should be placed on seizing merchandise, cutting supplies as much as possible. If necessary, frightening the large landowners who want to sell their farm products, burning vehicles that travel along the roads, and using them to blockade the roads. It is expedient in every action of sabotage that frequent contact be made with the enemy army at points not far away, always following the system of hit and run. It is not necessary to put up a serious resistance, but simply to show the adversary that in the area where the sabotage has been carried out, there are guerrilla forces disposed to fight. This forces him to take a large number of troops, to go with care, or not go at all. Thus, little by little, all the cities in the zone surrounding guerrilla operations will be paralyzed. 6. War industry. Industries of war within the sector of the guerrilla army must be the product of a rather large evolution. They also depend upon control of territory in a geographic situation favorable for the guerrilla. At a time when there are liberated zones, and when the enemy establishes strict blockades over all supplies, different departments will be organized as necessary, in the manner already described. There are two fundamental industries, of which one is the manufacture of shoes and leather goods. It is not possible for a troop to walk without shoes in wooded zones, hilly, with many rocks and thorns. It is very difficult to march without shoes in such conditions. Only the natives, and not all of them, can do it. The rest must have shoes. The industry is divided into two parts, one for putting on half-soles and repairing damaged shoes. The other will be devoted to the manufacture of rough shoes. There should be a small but complete apparatus for making shoes. Since this is a simple industry practiced by many people in such regions, it is very easy to procure. Connected with the shoe repair works, there ought always to be a shop making all classes of canvas and leather goods for use by the troop, such as cartridge belts and knapsacks. Although these articles are not vital, they contribute to comfort and give a feeling of autonomy, of adequate supply, and of self-reliance to the troop. An armory is the other fundamental industry for the small internal organization of the guerrilla band. This also has different functions, that of simple repair of damaged weapons, of rifles, and other available arms. The function of manufacturing certain types of combat arms that the inventiveness of the people will create, and the preparation of mines with various mechanisms. When conditions permit, equipment for the manufacture of powder may be added. If it is possible to manufacture the explosive as well as the percussion mechanisms in free territory, brilliant achievements can be scored in this category, which is a very important one, because communications by road can be completely paralyzed by the adequate employment of mines. Another group of industries that has its importance will make iron and tin products. In the iron works will be centered all labor connected with the equipping of the mules, such as making their shoes. In the tin works, the fabrication of plates and especially of canteens is important. A foundry can be joined with the tin works. By melting soft metals, it is possible to make grenades, which with a special type of charge will contribute in an important way to the armament of the troop. There ought to be a technical team for general repair and construction work of varied types. The service battery, as it is called in regular armies. With the guerrillas, it would operate as such, taking care of all necessities, but without any vestige of the bureaucratic spirit. Someone must be in charge of communications. He will have as his responsibility not only propaganda communications, such as radio directed toward the outside, but also telephones and roads of all types. We will use the civil organization as necessary in order to perform his duties effectively. Remember that we are in a period of war subject to attack by the military, and that often many lives depend upon timely communication. For accommodating the troop, it is well to have cigarette and cigar factories. The leaf can be bought in selected places and carried to free territory, where the articles for consumption by the soldiers can be manufactured. An industry for preparing leather from hides is also of great importance. All these are simple enterprises that can operate quite well anywhere, and are easy to establish in the guerrilla situation. The industry for making leather requires some small construction with cement. Also, it uses large amounts of salt, but it will be an enormous advantage to the shoe industry to have its own supply of raw material. Salt should be made in revolutionary territory and accumulated in large quantities. It is made by evaporating water of a high saline concentration. The sea is the best source, though there may be others. It is not necessary to purify it of other ingredients for purposes of consumption, though these give it a flavor that is disagreeable at first. Meat should be conserved in the form of jerked beef, which is easy to prepare. This can save many lives among the troop in extreme situations. It can be conserved with salt in large barrels for a fairly long time, and it can then be eaten in any circumstances. 7. Propaganda. The revolutionary idea should be diffused by means of appropriate media to the greatest depth possible. This requires complete equipment and an organization. This organization should be of two types which complement each other in covering the whole national area. For propaganda originating outside free territory, that is, from the national civil organization, and propaganda originating within, that is, from the base of the guerrilla army. In order to coordinate these two propagandas, the functions of which are strictly related, there should be a single director for the whole effort. Propaganda of the national type from civil organizations outside free territory should be distributed in newspapers, bulletins, and proclamations. The most important newspapers will be devoted to general matters in the country, and will inform the public exactly of the state of the guerrilla forces, observing always the fundamental principle that truth in the long run is the best policy. Besides these publications of general interest, there must be others more specialized for different sectors of the population. A publication for the countryside should bring to the peasant class a message from their companions in all the free zones who have already felt the beneficial effects of the revolution. This strengthens the aspirations of the peasantry. A workers' newspaper will have similar characteristics, with the sole difference that it cannot always offer a message from the combatant part of that class, since it is likely that workers' organizations will not operate within the framework of guerrilla warfare until the last stages. The great watchwords of the revolutionary movement, the watchword of a general strike at the opportune moment, of help to the rebel forces, of unity, etc., should be explained. Other periodicals can be published. For example, one explaining the tasks of those elements in the whole island which are not combatants, but which nevertheless carry out diverse acts of sabotage, of attempts, etc. Within the organization, there can be periodicals aimed at the enemy soldiers. These will explain facts, of which they are otherwise kept ignorant. News bulletins and proclamations about the movement are very useful. The most effective propaganda is that which is prepared within the guerrilla zone. Priority will be given to the diffusion of ideas among natives of the zone, offering explanations of the theoretical significance of the insurrection, already known to them as a fact. In this zone, there will also be peasant periodicals, the general organ of all the guerrilla forces, and bulletins and proclamations. There will also be the radio. All problems should be discussed by radio. For example, the way to defend oneself from air attacks and location of enemy forces, citing familiar names among them. Propaganda for the whole nation will use newspapers of the same type as those prepared outside free territory, but it can produce fresher and more exact news, reporting facts and battles that are extremely interesting to the reader. Information on international affairs will be confined almost exclusively to commentary on facts that are directly related to the struggle of liberation. The propaganda that will be the most effective in spite of everything, that which will spread most freely over the whole national area to reach the reason and the sentiments of the people, is words over the radio. The radio is a factor of extraordinary importance. At moments when war fever is more or less palpitating in everyone in a region or a country, the inspiring, burning word increases this fever and communicates it to every one of the future combatants. It explains, teaches, fires, and fixes the future positions of both friends and enemies. However, the radio should be ruled by the fundamental principle of popular propaganda, which is truth. It is preferable to tell the truth, small in its dimensions, than a large lie artfully embellished. On the radio, news should be given, especially of battles, of encounters of all types, and assassinations committed by the repression. Also, doctrinal orientations and practical lessons to the civil population, and from time to time, speeches by the chiefs of the revolution. We consider it useful that the principal newspaper of the movement bear a name that recalls something great and unifying, perhaps a national hero or something similar. Also, it should explain in articles of depth where the armed movement is going. It ought to create a consciousness of the great national problems, besides offering sections of more lively interest for the reader. 8. Intelligence. Know yourself and your adversary, and you will be able to fight 100 battles without a single disaster. This Chinese aphorism is as valuable for guerrilla warfare as is biblical song. Nothing gives more help to combatant forces than correct information. This arrives spontaneously from the local inhabitants, who will come to tell its friendly army, its allies, what is happening in various places. But in addition, it should be completely systematized. As we saw, there should be a postal organization with necessary contacts both within and outside guerrilla zones for carrying messages and merchandise. An intelligence service also should be in direct contact with enemy fronts. Men and women, especially women, should infiltrate. They should be in permanent contact with soldiers and gradually discover what there is to be discovered. The system must be coordinated in such a way that crossing the enemy lines into the guerrilla camp can be carried out without mishap. If this is well done with competent agents, the insurgent camp will be able to sleep more quietly. This intelligence will be concerned principally, as I have already said, with the front line of fire, or the forward enemy encampments that are in contact with no man's land. But it ought also to develop in the same measure as the guerrilla band develops, increasing its depth of operation and its potential to foresee larger troop movements in the enemy rear. Though all inhabitants are intelligence agents for the guerrilla band in the places where it is dominant or makes incursions, it is wise to have persons especially assigned to this duty. The peasants, not accustomed to precise battle language, have a strong tendency to exaggerate, so their reports must be checked. As the spontaneous forms of popular collaboration are molded and organized, it is possible to use the intelligence apparatus not only as an extremely important auxiliary, but also as a weapon of attack by using its personnel, for example, as sowers of fear. Pretending to be on the side of the enemy soldiers, they sow fear and instability by spreading discouraging information. By knowing exactly the places where the enemy troop is going to attack, it is easy to avoid him, or, when the time is ripe, to attack him at places where it is least expected. Mobility, the basic tactic, can be developed to the maximum. 9. Training and indoctrination. The fundamental training of the soldier of liberation is the life itself with the guerrilla band, and no one can be a chief who has not learned his difficult office in daily armed exercises. Life with some companions will teach something about the handling of arms.
He said some stuff in there that's sexist, because it was written a long time ago, but other than that, there's a lot to learn there.